I'm talking about somehow packaging Django applications as native desktop applications. The reason why I want to do that, I mean, we've seen Docker today and other things that can also do these things. And I also use Docker in controlled environments for my own development environment, for example, to set up certain architectures if I need multiple machines talking to each other and things like that. But I've seen a lot of situations where it would be really cool if somebody who wants to evaluate software, for example, would simply download an app, move it to the applications folder, double-click on it, and run it. Maybe just to get an idea if an application is the right option for him. And so I thought, okay, let's just bundle everything that we need into one binary. And I'd like to make it work on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, depending on what the app does, of course. So this is a workshop. So if you want to write code, you can do that. If you don't want to do that, you can still do it later. So first thing, if you want to follow that workshop and write some code, it would be really good if you had Xcode installed, including the command lines. And you need Python 3.4.4 and the project files. If you want to download the project files, I have this is an app that's written with the technology I just described. It's like a little download server that took me 10 minutes to do that. It just starts up, checks the external IP address, and prints it here to this, and checks what's inside that single folder there, in that files folder, and makes it available for download. So if you want to download something, you can do it. That's the IP address of my machine. I don't know how fast it will be here on the network, but you can at least download PyBrowse Complete. It's the project that will be the end result of the workshop. And I also made Python 3.4.4 available for that. And Xcode, but I think it's better if you already have it because it's, I think, 5 gigabytes in size, something like that. Let me check. Yeah, more than 5 gigs. By the way, I use Python 3.4.4 for the project because there's a lot of dependencies that you will see that need to run. And if you change anything in that setup, you might have some other results than I have. I show you how to make mistakes. I'm very good in that part, at least, and how to fix it. And I think you will see that the process of building these things can sometimes be a bit of work, but the end result is pretty easy for the user. So if you like, you can download that. I closed that window now, so to go back to the presentation somehow. So if you have these things installed, or you can still do that while we're talking, or while I'm talking, we can proceed with that. So I've heard a statement that says if your only tool is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. Some people say it was Mark Twain saying that, but actually it seems there were a lot of people who have stated that. So there's a link you can follow who really said it. But I think if Python is the hammer, then this is absolutely true, because you can do so many things with Python. So I do most things in Python. It's not that I don't like all the other things, but I figured out that I'm faster extending some Python modules or writing new modules to make Python do things that it can't do before you write these things than learning a new language. So in many cases, for me, Python is really a very powerful tool. And that's why I want to talk about using Python for all these things. So it doesn't really matter if you want to work with Django in the end. The main thing for me is that I have Python as a backend to do all kinds of stuff. And like this, for example, that's been a couple of years ago. I just built like a cat control in Python. It was a joke, of course, but people called me like, can I really do that? Control a cat using Bluetooth and Python. But anyway, so I do a lot of things with Python. And my main idea was I worked on a project in December where I needed to install a Django application. And it has been a couple of years ago that I did it the last time. And I was surprised that it was still quite a complex task to configure the web server, to make it talk to Django and Python. And so I thought that could be easier. And I like Docker, but I usually I get a lot of Docker containers where dependencies are not really clear, so you need to fix things. In a controlled environment, I love it a lot, but in if you share it with external people, sometimes people don't maintain the containers properly. So I thought I need something easier. And another thing that also came up, that sometimes I need a desktop application that basically does the same like the web application, but has access to local resources, so that it can leave the sandbox somehow of the browser. And I thought it would be great to have the same tools for that. So I thought I want to package Python, or the Python app as a double-clickable desktop app. Also to gain wider reach for my products. Like, for example, I work in the media asset management industry. That's my main environment right now. And whenever you install the tools that are around, it's really a complex task. It takes like hours to set it up and to install it. And I thought, why can I not simply drag and drop it? So I wanted that. And the other thing is, I wanted to be open to have both a desktop application that runs locally, but can also be available on the network, so that people can just open their browser, connect to it, or have the same tool running on a separate machine and they talk to each other. And of course, I want to have OS native features like file open dialogues, save dialogues, and things like that. What also happens, and this is also possible with the things we discuss here, you can sandbox everything on a Mac. You can support Apple events so that it receives Apple events, responds to them, and you can also share your code on the App Store if you want that. I mean, that's probably things that are not that relevant on the server side in many cases, but if you package your code in that way, you gain much wider reach for your audience. Because if people can just download it, that makes it pretty easy. And I also thought I need to run that on different machines because, I mean, I like to run things on the Mac, but in the real world, I think most of my customers have things like CentOS or Red Hat for the server. So I wanted to be platform independent, and I thought I also need to bundle things like PostgreSQL and Nginx, for example, or Apache with the whole thing. I don't show you how to do Postgres and Nginx during the workshop, but that works, and if you need to know how that can be done, we can discuss that afterwards. So that were the basic ideas, and then I thought, which tools should I use to do that? And so during the workshop, I used Python, and I prefer Python 3 over 2 if I can choose, mainly because I also do a lot of data migration things. And the Unicode handling is something I like very much in Python 3. And so if you want to also support Python 2 in the same package, usually for me that means a lot of work to make both work in the same way. So I go with Python 3. CherryPy as a web server in a way. I mean, that's in the final product we built today, that will just be the web server. But as an intermediate step, it will be the whole web framework that also generates dynamic content. And we use Django for the core web app in the end. One thing that I also use here, but that's also an option only, is PyWebView. That's an open source project that basically builds you a browser, which uses WebKit on Mac, GTK on Linux, and something else. I need to look it up. I have it in the next slide somewhere, on Windows. So it builds a native browser and just loads anything that you tell it into the browser. So to package the whole thing in the end, I use Py2App in the workshop, but you can also use Py2X, which is pretty similar, or PyInstaller, to bundle the app for other platforms. So why should I not use Cocoa instead? Or Swift-C or Qt? Yeah, why not? Because they're really good options. But as I said in the beginning, my primary goal was I wanted to stick with Python, just because I know Python and I use it for some projects. And actually for the project I'm working on right now, I even considered myself to do it in Swift instead. Because if you know Python, it takes you a day or two to really learn Swift. The only thing that takes longer are the Cocoa frameworks, I would say. And that can be like a lot of work. But I'm more efficient sticking with Python. That's the main thing. If you are not into Python so much, there's of course plenty of tools doing similar things. For example, if you're into JavaScript, there's MacApp, Electron, NWJS. Like Slack, for example, is written in Electron, and the Atom browser, the Atom editor. So great tools, but doesn't help me much. I mean, it's the other way around. I mean, it's for JavaScript people who need to write back-end code. That's great solutions, and I come from the Python world, and I want to do front-end code. So it's somehow the same thing, but from the other side. So PyWebView, it has a GitHub page. It's a Python module, so you can use it like pip install PyWebView, and that's it. It works with both Python 2 and 3. So if you're working with projects that don't support Python 3 yet, you can also make it work with Python 2. Yeah, it works with Qt4 and 5, Win32 on Windows, and the main thing here probably it's BSD license. So we haven't discussed licensing of the other apps so much, apart from that they were open source today. For me, that's usually pretty relevant because I write commercial software sometimes. I mean, I open source some things and some others I don't. So I need to make sure that the license allows me to do what I need to do. Good thing about PyWebView is it's pretty basic in its default form. So it opens a window, but it doesn't give you many options in the menus. And if you want to extend it, it's just Python, Objective-C, and Python. So you can add whatever you need. CherryPy, the second tool that we use here, is a web application framework. Oh, there's a typo. Okay, as I said, I'm good in making all these mistakes, and we can fix it then. The good thing about it is it's a production-ready HTTP server. So if you just run the internal HTTP server that comes with Django, they tell you all the time you shouldn't do that in a production environment. So we need to replace it with something. So we use CherryPy for that because it can serve Django applications, and it's pure Python. So you can make it work on Windows, Linux, and OS X without installing any extra things. If you want to use Nginx, for example, you can also use it in conjunction with CherryPy. That gives you, of course, more power. But CherryPy is already very powerful, and it uses really, really little RAM. So the resource, it's not very resource hungry. And again, it supports Python 2 and 3, and it's also BSD licensed, so you can use it in commercial applications if you like. Then there's Django, again, Python 2 and 3. One reason why I use Django is that also in our industry, there's a lot of Django applications. So I thought there's hopefully some people of you that might think about using the things we do today. And it has all these things that we need. So now let's dig into the code somehow. Maybe what might be, oh, sorry, wrong one. What might be interesting for you, there's my webpage, moosystems.com, and there's an article, package Django or distribute Django web apps as native desktop apps, and that explains everything in detail that we do today. So maybe it might make sense for you also to use it to copy code over. That would make things easier, probably. So who works with Python, right, in general? Okay, a lot. And who uses PyCharm? I'm really Atom, VI, and apart from that, what's the other options? Okay, really? I had it before. I like it a lot, but you need more plugins to work on remote servers. So I'm a big PyCharm fan, and I would buy any machine that runs PyCharm nowadays. But that's just something up. Let's start writing the project somehow. I create a new folder, and I call it PyBrowse on the desktop. And I open the shell. Is it okay? Can you read that? Also in the last row? Good. Like that? Okay. Let me check how it looks. Okay. So I'm using virtual environments in general with every project. Especially in this project, it's relevant because we are going to change the code of some modules. Not much, but a little bit. So it would be better to do this in a virtual environment. So if you want to follow, maybe you need to check if you have virtual env installed. Who works with virtual env? Okay. To be honest, I would prefer if I could just build the whole virtual environment before the show and then hand over the whole folder, including Python and all the modules, to make it easier to follow. But that's not really easy. I mean, the thing is that the whole thing works with absolute paths in a way. So if I create it on my desktop, I cannot hand it over to you so that it would work. There's support for relative paths, and the idea is that you could easily migrate your environment to other machines or to other paths, but that's still experimental, and I haven't really made it work yet. So in my case, we need to create a new virtual environment. There's also venv, so in Python 3.4 or 5, I think in 4 it showed up. So it comes with Python and the default installer, which has similar functionality. So you could also use that instead. So what I do now, if virtual env is not installed, you can just do it, pip install virtual env, and then it will install it inside the Python that you have pre-installed on OS X. By the way, if you install the Python 3.4.4 that I provided as a download link, then it will create a new Python installation in library frameworks and so on. So you can have Python 2.7.11, that's the recent version you download from Python.org. You can have the Python 2.7.10 on the that comes with a machine, and several different Python 5 versions. So what we can see is, like for example, if I use Python -v, that is the default version. Then I have Python 2, which is somewhere else, and I have Python 3. So that's all different Python versions. Now I'm on the desktop, and I switch over to PyBrowse. You see it's an empty folder, it's still this one, and I create my virtual environment now. And what I do there is, I say minus pi, which means I want to install a specific Python version. I say I use Python 3 in this case, and I call in my environment just env for environment. And it also installs pip with it, which makes it easy for us to install more dependencies and more modules later on. It's okay, sorry. Yes?
If people have installed Python 3 with brew, the path is of course different.
Yeah, then the path would be different. You find the path by just entering which and Python 3, for example, and then you can either use that path that which spits out, or you just type Python 3 in here, and then it will figure out where you have it. So, but it's slow. Do we have a firewall here that checks for the content? Something like that? Oh, I broke my machine.
No, it's just running a demo on Wi-Fi is the problem.
But it's what?
Running a demo on Wi-Fi.
Yeah, might be. Is anybody still downloading the things from here?
Yes. I put a link to your website in Slack.
Okay.
Get the link to your website on here.
Yes, the link to the website is Moo Systems. Oh, sorry, wrong browser.
Whoever's torrenting Game of Thrones, cut it out.
Yeah, so you find it there from moosystems.com. You find also downloads to the code. Okay, so I leave that running. Is it the same for you? If you create a virtual environment, does it take long?
It's not going to have the internet to do that, though, is it?
Usually I thought it should take the local one, to be honest. Don't know. It's not fun if it works immediately. It's good that we started earlier. Okay, it's done now. Okay, so we have a virtual environment, but it's not active yet. So if I type, Python, which Python, it will still tell me that user bin Python is the main Python installer. So if I activate that environment, I go to bin activate, and if I ask for the Python version, you see that it's in my current working directory now. Okay, so that's the main thing right now, to have a virtual environment running, but we have no modules installed yet. So what we will need is Python Objective-C that comes pre-installed on OS 10, but it's linked to the internal Python 2.7.10 version. So it's better we reinstall it again. You can just type Py Objective-C, but that can take a longer time sometimes because of a challenge somehow there in the installer. So to guarantee that it's pretty fast, we need to install it in 2 steps. Pip install Py Objective-C core, which should be a pretty short installation, and after that we go and install Python Objective-C to prevent putting it in an install loop. Okay, so it will still take some time now. Okay, and Python Objective-C, that's the bindings for all the different Cocoa frameworks. That takes more time because it's more code. And this is the step that requires the Xcode installation. So if you have not used Xcode yet and the command line binaries, then it will ask you to activate it now. If you don't use a Python web view, then you don't need Python Objective-C. So what I do basically is like with a download application, you see it looks like an application, but the browser itself is a Python web view. Instead, you could also open it in an external browser. So you don't need to bundle it with the browser. It depends on what you want to achieve. But if you want to have open file dialogues and things like that, then I think it makes sense to bundle it. Okay, so I'm already done. And now I would install PyWebView. And that's basically it. So what happens now, we have no files available yet, so I create a file called main.py. And I make it executable. And now I open it in PyCharm, of course. What I like so much about PyCharm is that it does all the other things that are not pure Python. Like, for example, it has tools that I can test any REST API. So I can send JSON commands, XML, get responses, and really check out how a REST API works, for example. And that's really pretty cool. It's also easy to work on remote service. I used to use Sublime Edit for that before, but it was always updating external dependencies, and it's still great, but I really like that I have everything in here. So that's my app now, almost. It's here. So So that's the main file. If you downloaded, this PyBrowse complete zip file, then, maybe you want to unpack it to steal some code from there. That makes things a bit easier. Later on, just a second. So, again, wrong browser. So, I put some code in the article on the webpage. So sometimes it might make sense for you to look at the article. So I split it up into 4 parts. And in part 2, I start with some code which can be copied into the main file. But I will explain you what it does. It's pretty easy. First thing, because I mentioned that I do a lot of Unicode things like with metadata migration for media and stuff. And so I really also write source code that has some Unicode characters. So I tell my Python file that it should be encoded in UTF-8. It imports the web view, the module, and then it creates a window. So that's my module name. The command is create window. Then I give it a name. That's the thing in the title. I have a web page that it should open. That's the URL. And then you can set window width and height. That is an option. You don't need to say it. You can make it resizable if you like, and you can also set it to full screen. So that's pretty easy. And so if I run that, by the way, you can also tell PyCharm which version you want to, which Python version you want to use to open your files. You can also run your Django applications, and it also supports virtual environments. But let's go from here now. So I think we all have the command line. So it tells me there's a syntax error. Yeah.
Would you be able to make the font size larger?
The what?
Would you be able to make the text bigger?
Good question. That's something I've never done yet, but I guess. Yeah, it didn't work. Already tried that. Almost. Almost. You know what? I have a great idea. Okay. Is the size okay, or should I increase it? Here I know how to do it.
I can see it, but maybe the cards are really bad.
Okay. Like this? If I don't hear no, it's the size. Oh. Sorry. Oh. Not my day. Okay. So, okay, that's what happened now. Just a second. So it opens the web page that you've already seen before in a browser, and it has, right now it's part of the terminal session, so the menu has not changed yet, and you can just use it as a normal web page. So whatever my page does, that works here, and you might also have seen that it was not the frontmost application here, and that will stay the same later if we package it for some moment, so we need to fix that. Another thing is if I move a video on top of that, it opens that like in the browser. So we also need to tell PyWebView not to open anything if we drag it on top of that. So that's the main thing. We already created something that opens a web browser now. I think that's good enough for the moment. So later on, of course, we try to replace that with dynamic content that we produce locally. But right now, I think the next step should be that we package the whole thing. What we need now is to use Py2App on the Mac. Py2App comes bundled with Python Objective-C, so we already have it in place. And it also comes with an app that's called Py2Applet. And you also, again, you find all the commands that you need here on the website. It says that's the command, make setup, and then you point it to the file for which it should create the setup file. Main py. So now I have the setup py. If we look at it, there's some comments in the beginning, and then it points to the first Python file. It can optionally also copy data files with it later, and it can create an emulation of arguments. So, for example, if you want to open it and send some files to it during the startup process, that would be done. And then in the setup, it says that that's the main.py file. It can have data files, some options, and it requires Py2App. That's all. So nothing special in here. But we should add some things. Like, for example, we need an icon. You can download the icon file either from the web page here, but it's also part of the package here. So in the PyBrowse too, if you did that, you can just take the icon, move it into our folder. And then we also want to create some plist information for our app. So a bundle identifier, a name, and some copyright information if you like. So we do it in the options. So that's the plist, and I forgot to add the icon file thing. So, and now we can create a bundle by using Python, setup Py2App. And if we do that, it will bundle the application. So, and now you see something where it says it failed. And the thing there is that Py2App has a little bug which has been fixed, but it has not made it into the current Py2App distribution yet. So in line 52, it has not considered that in module graph, a module has been renamed. So I let you do all these things now to see what happens in the real world. So when you bundle these things, you will experience some challenges somehow. That's why I show you this, because you will find things like that. If you upgrade to Python 3.5 instead, you will have other errors. But it's pretty easy to fix that. So in line 52, for example, where was it? Here, that's the line. The module has been renamed to underscore load module. You just fix that. I mean, if you, in the production world, you would have an if clause where you make sure it would work with any kind of module graph. Here it's okay, and then we just run the bundle, the packaging again, and now it should be okay. So it has been done, and if we look into our folder now, there's a build folder where it creates all kinds of temporary files, and then we have the distribution folder, and here we have our app. So if I double click on that, it opens with an error. That's also on purpose. If we open the console, we see that it says import error, the 6 package is required. I don't know if you know 6, that's the package that is relevant for code that works with both Python 2 and 3, and where different modules exist for both things. So we need to make sure it's installed. That's one thing. Pip install 6. So it did that. And then the other thing is, if we run the whole thing again, do a package again, we will see that it still fails. The thing is that Py2App detects what kind of modules are required to build the app. So it copies a minimalized version of Python into the binary, including all the modules that you used. But sometimes it cannot really detect properly which modules you used, just for something. So you need to tell it manually that it needs to package these things. And that's something, sorry, yeah. You have an includes option, and there you need to name some of the modules, sorry, that you need to add manually. And so if we do that again, it would do that now and would not fail, but to be honest, in this case, it will also install some other things so that we need. And so these modules, the packaging thing, is also something that's missing. So we added already to make sure we have everything in place. I also need to install it, pip install packaging. And then we build the binary again. Oh, sorry. That's cool. And now it should start up properly. So now it works, but as you see, the window is not really the frontmost window, and I think I would expect that it's the frontmost window. So we also fixed that. And that's something that is the same, by the way, if you build TK environments, that you need to make it the frontmost app. And what we can do is we add some more code to our main application. And so actually I just replaced the whole thing now with the code we find here. Sorry. So let's probably just go through it to get an idea what's happening. I import more stuff. There's the web view thing, of course, still, and then I use subprocess to enter a command, some logging information. Then I check if am I running as a Py2App binary or as a script, and then I set some variables like run as binary to true or false, and I set the base directory to the current directory of the app. I set up logging. I have 3 logs, like a PyBrowse log, an access and error log for CherryPy. And so that's this point. And then I have a command that tells the Finder to make this the frontmost app. Somehow that's a bit of a hack, but it works. And in the end, I create my run loop for the web server. So I can again package the whole thing. And if I open it up, now it should be the frontmost application. So, but still, if I drag a movie on top of that, it plays the movie. So I also want to fix that. How can we do that? In part 3, we installed CherryPy first. So I create a new web page somehow, and while we're doing that, that we prevent dragging and dropping files, we also make it dynamic. So we install CherryPy as a web application framework. So that was it already. And again, we replace the content of the main Py file. So, what does it do? In the beginning, it is almost the same, apart from the fact that it imports CherryPy and a threading module, and also some modules that are used to create a function later on. And then, this is what CherryPy does. I just create one class where I define some paths somehow in the index HTML using a decorator that CherryPy should expose that. And then I have the index method, which just returns a web page. So this is just a very simple thing to have something that we want to display. So I have a title and all the metadata that you expect from a web page. And then to prevent dragging things on my site, I add something to the body tag, like on drag start, return false, draggable false, on drag enter, and so on. So this is all code that prevents dragging on top of that. Instead, you can also prevent dragging just on certain parts of your application and make other things accept these things. And then you could have a JavaScript talking to a backend functionality to open a file open dialog. This is important if you want to sandbox your application and allow distributing via the App Store. So you can still interact with files on your operating system this way. So this is just a simple class. So it returns a web page. Then I have a command called generate, and that just creates a stupid string. It doesn't do anything relevant, but it's there to show you that it can create dynamic content later on. And this is something I invoke using a JavaScript on my web page. You will see on the web page there's that script here. And this is an asynchronous task for to invoke that command here. By the way, I like a lot of frameworks, but I try not to use anything in the front end because I think I need to deal with most things in the back end anyway. And as long as I can talk to things asynchronously, I try to keep the front end as small as possible. But you can, of course, combine it with everything that's there. So then I have a functionality there to start the server. So it sets up some configuration that it supports sessions. There's a static root where I get some files like CSS files. I have a public folder there. And then I configure CherryPy. So I say, I tell it to use my log files, for example, and the port and the IP address. And now comes the big part. I mean, I just defined a class, but I haven't started anything. So I use CherryPy and start it as a thread, because my event loop basically will be the WebView event loop later on. If you don't use the WebView thing to create an event loop, you should probably use CherryPy as your event loop in the main thread. So what I do here is I split something up to make it work in the end, have an event loop that talks to the user, and once I close the WebView loop, I also close the other thing automatically. So that's basically it. And again, I can package the whole thing. And while it's doing that, I forgot something. We need to copy the public folder into the PyBrowse folder. And I do it again. And we need to change the setup py, because right now we haven't told the system to use anything that's in the public folder. So the setup doesn't know that we copied the file, the public folder with the CSS folder and the style CSS file. So it has no idea that it should package it into my bundle. So we need to tell it that it should do it. And so what I do, I replace the whole setup py with this. We can go through the code again, sorry. Okay, so what has changed is this. We have added a functionality that finds all the files inside any folder that we use, and then we tell the system to find all files in the public folder as data files, and then we add these things to the setup command here. And what we have changed in addition is we have added a line called packages and cherrypy.wsgi server. So that's something that is required to make the whole thing run. So now we can build it again. And if we're lucky, it should work again. So if I double click on it, it doesn't work. So what does it say? Okay. It doesn't work because I still have this running. Is anybody still downloading things from here? I think this is a no. So I start it again. So it used a port that was already used by something else. So this is our application. It's the frontmost application. It looks beautiful. Okay, probably not. And it has a button where if you click on it, it talks to the dynamic web server and fetches that 8-character string. So it's not really something fancy, but it's a dynamic web application that does things. Right now, I think this is already the base that you can use to build any kind of web page that looks like a local application. So you can, or you just take something like, I don't know, Monkey Web Admin, something like that could be bundled as an application using these things. What I find very interesting using these things is that Django comes with a new channels module sometime this summer. I don't know if you've heard about that. So this is an application where we have a classic request-response cycle. So I click on something, and so that sends a request to the server processes it, and sends me a result. But that's not really what we expect from a real-time application nowadays. It should update itself automatically. So what people do is either they have JavaScripts that talk to the server every now and then, or every second, every 10 seconds, but that creates a lot of load even in moments where nothing is happening. So the channels module that's available for Django adds real-time communication. So it means like WebSockets, or it uses WebSockets to create an open communication channel, and both server and client can send communication and information all the time. And if you combine that with this kind of technology, it's really easy to build real-time applications, updating its UI. So that's it already. And I think if you're not using Django, that has been the whole thing already. If you're using Django, though, then we need to add some things. That's the fourth part of the whole thing. First thing, we need to install it. Pip install Django. Who's using Django? Okay. So that's it. And we need to copy the resources folder, from the file we downloaded into the PyBrowse folder. And then we can start the Python server with using manage py, run server, and then I add an IP address and the port 000. means it should be, sorry. It should be available on all network interfaces, and I'm in the wrong folder still. So I need to go into a subdirectory that, sorry, I've forgotten to copy that. So the whole application is in a folder called My App. So that's this one. And I go into that folder, and now I rerun the command. And if I open that page, sorry, let's go here probably. Yeah, it's not on the index page, that's the address. Then we have something, that's actually the poll application that you get in the tutorial. So I use that so that you can follow this. It's not about writing the Django app now. It's more about making it usable inside that. So you can have a poll with great questions like, do you enjoy MacDevOps? Yeah, awesome, great, can't be any better. And then you get results. So it's a very easy application. And so the code is pretty easy, but I think we really don't need to get into the details there. But it comes with a little SQLite database that's inside that application, and a little bit of code, but it's really pretty simple, and it's basically the code example from the Django page. So if we have that, it works as a web page, but we still need to bundle it. And of course, the other thing is now it runs the development server of Django, and we don't want that. So we need to replace it with a cherry pie thing. And I created a file called start Django and cherry pie. And that's the file that opens the whole thing then. It's already inside, sorry, my application folder, I think. Yeah. And it looks like this. It imports some things like URL-lib, URL parse, cherry pie, Django, web view, some threading things. And now we start with the Django application. It opens a server, imports the cherry pie WSGI server, and sets it up to work on like port and paths and things like that. It also uses like favicons. This is the behavior when it runs. So everything is written in one class. And if we want to start the whole thing, that's app run. And here, this is the code that we invoke when this is the main script. It means, again, we figure out where are we running. Is it a frozen version or a script? We set up logging again, set up some Django settings, make it the frontmost app, and again, we start a thread with a dynamic web server. So to make it run in the back end, then we open the window, and in the end, if somebody closed the window, we also stop the web server in this case. I mean, that's an option, but that's how it works. And so we could use start Django and cherry pie. Sorry, it doesn't work right now. I think I need to bundle it first. Yeah. Okay, we also need to install something. Sorry, paste. Forgot that. And so now we do the whole thing. Now it looks like before, but now it's not the development web server anymore, but cherry pie serving the Django application. So that's this. And then to bundle it, we changed the setup pie again. And I think I already have one here. Yes. So this is how it looks. Again, we take the Python path. Not again, but we take this, and we also figure out where the Django admin path is. So we just need to understand some paths for our files that we copy. Then the app now that we bundle is Start Django and CherryPy. Then some data files like the templates and static folders, and icon file. Now the packages include Django, my app, the folder polls, the CherryPy thing. So there's more and more things, and to figure out which things you need to add there, that's how we did it in the beginning. When it fails, the logs tell you what was missing, and you just add it there. So that's it. And sorry. And now we can bundle it again. Set up PyPy to app. I think something was missing. Let me check. So that would be the new app. Open console. Yeah, HTML parser has not been installed. So, did I install it? Don't think so. Okay, again, a file that I need to fix. 990. Sorry. Okay. I'm sorry for that. Okay, there's a single line where I need to remove a point or a dot. And now it should do it, package it again. So, I mean, I did it on purpose that I show you the boring stuff now where it fails, but I think you get an idea that some details create some work for you if you do it that way. So it doesn't probably or necessarily make it very easy to create these things, but once you are up and running with that and just change some of your code, it's very easy to rebuild it all the time, and distribution is really easy then. So I think now it should almost work. No module. Did I change that? Parse error. Sorry for that. Actually, that's the final step anyway, so shouldn't be a big problem. I also forgot to install a module requests. That's what it just mentioned in between. And should be done in a second. Okay. Same thing. I need HTML parser. How did I? Okay, I forgot to install the thing. So, but I think that should be it now. So, something else. No, they're the same thing. Okay, but I think you get the idea. Of course, I could fix it now, but I've got the whole thing working as a final package here. So what it does now, it gets the data. Sorry, that's the other thing, the original thing. I have it. So that's the final app, which runs Django, and if you drag something on top of that, it doesn't open it anymore. So it's a very easy way somehow to distribute things now. And what I really like about it now is, I mean, if you just forget that you had a horrible 60 minutes now, is you end up with something that is just a very small application. I mean, it's 16 megabytes, but that includes the whole Python runtime, all the modules that we created, and if it, all the graphics. So it's not really huge, and it runs on any kind of OS 10. If you want to do the whole thing, I mean, I think it starts with 10.6 that's supported. And so in my tests, for example, I do, I'm really old-fashioned. Somehow I have like OS 10 virtual machines in Fusion, and that's how I run my tests usually with the final applications there. And I go back to 10.6, and these things, I've tested them back to 10.6, and it all works with these things. You can also use Py2X to create Windows binaries, and you can use PyInstall, for example, to create CentOS or any kind of Linux installers or binaries. And I really like the idea of distributing complex things like that, because once you're able to start the application, you really know it can be opened on any kind of OS 10 version. And that makes it quite attractive. Like, for example, if you have a really complex client management thing running and you want to sell your services to a client, if they want to have a look, you either need to make appointments and spend a lot of time, or you just send them a binary, they open it up, have a first look, and get an idea, if it's easy enough to use. So I think that's a wonderful option to gain more or wider reach and have more customers somehow. Yeah, that was basically the main coding part already. What is very relevant for me still, what I mentioned in the beginning, is the licensing. So if you're putting these things as a more or less closed source, I mean, it's really easy to decompile what you did there. And by the way, the first application where you point Py2App to, that will be contained in clear text. So for example, if we look into the application we just created, show package contents, it looks like a normal macOS 10 application. You have the PyBrowse binary somehow, which includes all your scripts in a not in a really binary version, but a bit compiled. You have Python, and you have your resources. And your main script, the first one that you open, that's contained in clear text. So if you don't want your users to read your code, probably you just import a second module where you have your code, if you don't want to hide it. The thing is, though, if you start your application, Py2App will copy everything into a temporary folder. So if somebody wants to read your code, you would simply, I don't know, use file system events or something like that to check what kind of files your application creates and read these things. So there's a way to read your binary code, if you like. So if you really need to hide things, that's probably not the best way. But most users don't really figure out what you do there. And you can also, I don't know, import C code, if you like, for the things that really need to be hidden. But I already had an app on the market that was licensed, and also the licensing code was just obfuscated in a way, and nobody ever figured out. So you can do this. Is this going public later? I hope everybody will now figure out that they can bypass my licensing methods. Anyway. But if you import third-party applications and you create commercial software, you really need to make sure that all your modules have the right licensing. I think for open source projects, most of the things are pretty okay, most licenses. If you use LGPL licenses, that's also very easy because you can just import everything as long as you put it into your license scheme, your license text. With, for example, FFmpeg, it means if you compile it, you cannot compile it with a non-free codecs. But if you do it, if you don't do that, you're fine. I find it very interesting, as I said, to have these double-clickable apps, not only for demo versions. It's also a matter of architecture. For example, if you want to scale up, you could have machines that have just double-clickable server applications and scale up by talking to each other, something like that. So it can also be an option for deployment in production environments. You can have UIs that don't necessarily need to be HTML stuff. You can also use TK or Cocoa, Qt if you want. But I really like the web stuff because a lot of our tools already use that. Packaging can be some work, as I said, but that makes it easier in the end if it's done. And you find the workshop and the samples on the web page that we used to copy the code anyway. So that was already it. Is it something, I'm really interested, do you think that makes sense for some of your projects to package it in that way for distribution? Or to build clients, for example? I mean, you can build a client that runs as a native app on the desktop to access local resources and talks to your main server stuff? Or is it something where you would rather consider writing things in Objective-C or Swift? Okay. If someone wants to use that, and you have questions like, how can I bundle Nginx or Apache or Postgres? I'm here, so just talk to me, and I'm happy to help. Thanks a lot. That was it already.
Thank you, André.